When I returned from a 2-day work trip, something fell off. My key didn't fit the front door. Not jammed, replaced. My porch looked like a makeover gone wrong. My carefully arranged native plants were gone. In their place, dying petunias and a creepy cement gnome holding a welcome sign. My custom mailbox had been replaced with a rusty, generic tin box. At first, I thought maybe I was at the wrong house. But no, this was mine, just hijacked. Turns out, while I was away, the HOA president decided my yard didn't match the neighborhood aesthetic and took it upon herself to fix it. No warning, no permission, just a power trip in flip-flops. Ever come home and feel like a guest at your own place? Drop a comment where you're watching from. I need to know if this madness is national or just Maple Ridge Estates. I had been living in Maple Ridge Estates for just under 3 months when I first crossed paths with Kelsey Bradford. The morning was perfect. Crisp mountain air rolled down from the Rockies. Sunlight bounced off the pale brick and stone facades of the hillside community. I was arranging my new document delivery box beside my front door, a sleek, professional-looking installation that matched the house's bronze fixtures. As a corporate attorney specializing in data privacy and cybersecurity, I often received sensitive documents that needed secure delivery. The box was discreet, matched the aesthetic of the house, and I had reviewed the HOA architectural guidelines thoroughly before installation. That's when I heard the distinctive sound of flip-flops slapping against heels, approaching at a determined pace. "Excuse me, what exactly do you think you're doing to your facade?" The voice was sharp, carrying a forced, authoritative tone that seemed at odds with its owner's appearance. I turned to find a woman in her mid-30s, wearing an outfit that looked like it was curated from the clearance rack of several different department stores, a jumble of bright colors and clashing patterns. Her clipboard was covered in motivational stickers, and her phone case sparkled with so many rhinestones it looked like a disco ball. "I'm Ethan Caldwell. Just moved in last month," I said, offering my hand. She looked at it, but didn't take it. "I'm Kelsey Bradford, Maple Ridge Estates HOA president," she replied, her tone dripping with self-importance. "That installation disrupts the architectural harmony of the community. You'll need to remove it immediately or face daily fines." She thrust a violation notice at me, already filled out. I noticed she'd marked the fine at $750, which seemed excessive even by Colorado standards. "Actually," I replied calmly, "I've reviewed the guidelines thoroughly. Document boxes under 18 inches in height are explicitly permitted as long as they match existing fixtures. I'd be happy to show you the relevant section. As a lawyer, I was used to people attempting to assert authority they didn't actually possess." Kelsey's face flushed slightly. "Well, the Architectural Review Committee has the final say, and as chair of that committee, I'm informing you that this installation doesn't meet our standards. You'll receive formal notification within 48 hours. She spun around, flip-flops slapping loudly as she marched to the next house. I finished the installation, then took photos documenting compliance with every measurement specified in the guidelines. Something told me this wouldn't be the last time I'd need documentation. 2 weeks later, I received a certified letter denying my retroactive application for the document box, an application I'd never submitted. The letter ordered removal within 7 days. I drafted a formal response, citing the specific guidelines, included photographs demonstrating compliance, and attached 3 examples of similar boxes on board members' homes that I'd photographed during my morning runs. I hand-delivered my response to the HOA office and requested it be added to the agenda for the upcoming monthly meeting. That evening, I met my neighbor Martha Donovan, a retired school principal whose meticulously maintained garden of native mountain plants was the envy of the block. "I see you've had your first Kelsey encounter," she said, leaning on her fence. "She's targeting your privacy hedge next." I heard her telling the landscaping crew that it blocks community views, even though it's clearly under the height restriction. Martha's eyes showed genuine concern. "You might want to attend Thursday's meeting. She has a pattern of targeting new homeowners who don't immediately conform to her vision, especially professionals like you who might challenge her authority." The HOA meeting was held in the community center overlooking a sweeping view of the Rockies. The room was half filled with residents, most looking simultaneously bored and anxious. The universal expression of homeowners fearing their property values might be discussed. Kelsey presided at the front table, dressed in what appeared to be her version of business attire, a blindingly bright floral dress paired with oversized sunglasses and clacking plastic jewelry. When my item came up on the agenda, I presented my case succinctly, showing the relevant guidelines and photographic evidence of compliance. Kelsey interrupted repeatedly, invoking procedural points and eventually calling for a vote before discussion was complete. All those in favor of requiring removal of the non-compliant installation at the Caldwell residence. 4 hands went up, Kelsey's and 3 board members who hadn't spoken a single word. Those opposed, Martha and 2 others, raised their hands. Motion passes. The committee will investigate further, with a decision to be rendered within 60 days, Kelsey declared, already moving to the next agenda item. I caught Martha's eye across the room. She gave me a subtle head shake that clearly communicated, this is how it always goes. Over the next week, I installed an integrated documentation system throughout my property. High-def cameras disguised as smart home features, weather sensors, irrigation controls, and lighting fixtures. As a digital evidence specialist, I knew the importance of comprehensive documentation, and something told me I needed it. My suspicions were confirmed when Martha knocked on my door one morning. I thought you should know, she said quietly. Kelsey has a history of accidentally damaging non-compliant features during inspections. 3 months ago, the Hendersons' decorative window boxes mysteriously fell off and shattered during an inspection while they were out of town. I thanked Martha for the warning, then logged into my security system to ensure all zones were active. The system had already captured Kelsey photographing my house from multiple angles the previous day. I had a feeling my little document box was about to become the least of my problems. The following Saturday morning, I was enjoying a cup of coffee on my deck, overlooking the majestic Rockies, when my security alerts pinged my phone. I glanced at the live feed to see Kelsey Bradford standing across the street, gesturing toward my house while talking with Alan Thompson, the HOA's landscaping contractor. My directional microphone, cleverly disguised as a porch light, captured their conversation perfectly. Schedule the emergency landscaping correction for Tuesday, around 10 o'clock, Kelsey said, her voice carrying a tone of manufactured urgency. His car is always gone by 9 o'clock. Alan hesitated. Shouldn't we notify him first? The emergency clause is really for immediate safety issues. Kelsey's dismissive laugh made my jaw clench. Alan, you want your contract renewed next year, right? This is clearly within our authority. Besides, I sent an email notification this morning. We're protecting the community's aesthetic. She then pointed toward my perfectly trimmed hedges and my native mountain plants, the ones specifically chosen to conserve water and support local pollinators. Remove everything in this front bed, including those ridiculous privacy hedges. Replace it all with approved species. I want it done before he even knows what happened. I felt my pulse quicken. This wasn't just a power trip. It was a calculated attempt to erase my carefully curated landscape under the guise of emergency maintenance. That afternoon, I called Martha Donovan, who confirmed that she had seen the landscaping trucks parked in front of my house earlier in the week. Next, I sent a formal cease and desist email to the entire board, only to receive an automated out-of-office response from Kelsey. My call to the local sheriff was equally frustrating. The deputy explained that HOAs have certain maintenance rights, and this would likely be considered a civil matter unless I could prove malicious intent. Fuming, I reviewed the footage again. Kelsey had clearly targeted my property for no reason other than to assert control. She had no intention of following the proper procedures or giving me any notice. I spent the rest of the day documenting everything and updating my security systems to ensure I had multiple layers of backup, including off-site cloud storage. Tuesday came faster than expected. I had a court appearance in Denver, defending a corporate client in a critical cybersecurity case. I left my house just before 8 a.m., my mind torn between the impending court battle and the brewing conflict at home. As I sat in bumper-to-bumper traffic on I-70, my phone pinged again. It was my security system, motion detected at the front yard. I quickly pulled up the live feed. There they were, Alan and his crew, along with Kelsey, who had apparently decided to personally oversee the destruction. As you can see, Kelsey said to the workers, hands on hips, these non-native plants pose a significant environmental hazard to the local watershed. We're invoking the emergency remediation clause in Section 12 to remove them and replace them with approved species. One of the workers looked confused. These don't look like non-native plants. They're actually drought-tolerant. Aren't we supposed to promote those? Kelsey shot him a withering glare. I don't pay you to question my decisions. Just do your job. And make sure to pull those hedges. They're blocking the community view. I gripped the steering wheel tightly. She was fabricating environmental hazards to justify the destruction of my property. I felt a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't just petty HOA politics anymore. This was personal. As soon as I arrived in Denver, I found a quiet corner in the courthouse lobby and opened my laptop. I reviewed the footage as the landscapers began methodically ripping out my carefully selected native plants, ripping through the irrigation system I had installed to conserve water. One of them accidentally severed the main water line, causing a spray of water across the yard. Shut it off at the street. Kelsey barked, showing no concern for the damage. We'll report this as an emergency water situation. Alan hesitated, looking uncomfortable. Kelsey, this is going too far. Cutting off his water service. Kelsey cut him off. This is exactly why we needed to act. His non-compliant system was a disaster waiting to happen. She turned to face one of my hidden cameras directly, though she didn't know it was there. Besides, when people don't follow the rules, they face consequences. I clenched my jaw. This was no longer just about landscaping. This was deliberate property damage, harassment, and an attempt to intimidate a resident into compliance. By the time I left the courthouse that evening, I had formulated a plan. Kelsey had just escalated our conflict from a minor HOA dispute to potential criminal behavior. I stopped by the hardware store on the way home, picking up a few more discreet security devices and additional outdoor lighting. I wanted to make sure that every inch of my property was monitored, every interaction recorded, and every piece of evidence backed up securely. When I pulled into my driveway, I found a scene that would have made any homeowner's blood boil. My carefully arranged front yard had been transformed into a disaster zone. My custom irrigation system had been ripped out, replaced by standard sprinklers that were already pooling water around my foundation. My native plants, designed to conserve water and support local wildlife, had been replaced with thirsty, high-maintenance ornamentals. The custom mailbox I had installed was gone, replaced with a generic metal box, and a bright yellow architectural violation notice was taped to my front door, citing me for unauthorized landscaping. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. This wasn't just about plants anymore. This was about control, power, and intimidation. But Kelsey had underestimated her opponent. I was a lawyer who specialized in digital evidence, and I had just the tools and the patience to document every single violation she had committed. I opened my front door, glanced at the security camera feed, and smiled. Every second of her illegal raid had been recorded, from the moment she set foot on my property to the final, smug flourish as she ordered my water shut off. Kelsey Bradford had just declared war on the wrong homeowner. When I got back inside, I immediately uploaded all the video footage to my secure cloud storage. I wasn't going to risk losing a single frame of evidence if Kelsey tried something even more reckless. The footage clearly showed her giving orders to cut my water line, rip out compliant landscaping, and remove my custom irrigation system, all without my consent. I spent the next 2 hours drafting a formal complaint to the Maple Ridge Estates HOA board and the property management company, Summit Ridge Property Services, citing specific violations of their own guidelines. I included screenshots from the footage, timestamps, and a detailed breakdown of the financial damages they had caused. I demanded immediate reimbursement for my landscaping, restoration of my irrigation system, and a formal apology from Kelsey. Then, I took the next step, calling Valerie Matthews, a friend and former colleague who had recently transitioned from corporate law to a position as a regulatory compliance officer for the Colorado Department of Water Resources. "Valerie, it's Ethan. I need a favor," I said, pacing my living room. I have a situation involving an HOA president who just cut off my water supply and replaced my drought-tolerant landscaping with water-hogging ornamentals. I think it might violate several state conservation regulations. Valerie's tone immediately shifted from friendly to professional. That sounds serious. Send me the footage. If this is what it sounds like, they could be facing some hefty fines. Later that evening, I sat on my back deck, watching the sunset over the Rockies, my mind racing through every possible angle. I pulled up the HOA bylaws on my tablet, reading them for the third time that week. The more I read, the clearer it became that Kelsey had overstepped her authority in nearly every possible way. I made a list of potential legal violations. Illegal water shutoff. Cutting off a homeowner's water without proper cause or notice is a potential criminal act. Property damage. The destruction of my landscaping and irrigation system could constitute criminal mischief. Invasion of privacy. The footage showed her directing workers to peer through my windows and photograph my home. Financial misconduct. The invoices for the replacement plants appeared to be significantly inflated, suggesting potential kickbacks or financial mismanagement. As a corporate attorney, I had handled complex litigation involving corporate fraud, contract breaches, and regulatory violations. I was more than capable of taking on this petty HOA tyrant. But I knew from experience that a frontal assault rarely worked in situations like this. I needed to undermine her credibility and expose her corruption publicly, in a way that left no room for doubt. The next morning, I was preparing to head back to Denver for another court appearance when I received a call from Jackson Grant, the HOA treasurer. "Ethan, I heard about what happened. I just want you to know that not everyone on the board supports Kelsey's tactics," he said, his tone tense. "She tends to act unilaterally and, well, intimidates anyone who questions her decisions." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" Because from where I stand, it looks like the entire board just gave her a blank check to destroy my property. Jackson sighed. "Look, Kelsey has a way of framing things to make them sound like community necessities. She told us your hedges were a safety hazard and that your water system was a flood risk. I didn't realize how far she planned to go until I saw the photos." I felt a flicker of hope. If Jackson was nervous enough to reach out to me directly, it meant Kelsey's grip on the board might not be as ironclad as she believed. "Would you be willing to go on the record about this?" I asked, keeping my tone measured, because I have video evidence that contradicts every single one of her claims. There was a long pause on the line. "Let me think about it," Jackson finally replied. "But keep this between us for now. If she finds out I'm talking to you, it won't end well." After I hung up, I quickly shot off an email to Valerie, attaching the footage and a detailed description of the incident. Within an hour, she replied with a message that made my day. From Valerie Matthews to Ethan Caldwell. Subject: HOA water violation. Ethan, this is a clear violation of multiple state water conservation regulations. I'll forward this to our enforcement team. You might want to prepare for an inspection. They won't take this lightly. Valerie. Perfect. That afternoon, as I was driving back from Denver, I received another ping from my security system. Kelsey had returned, this time without her landscaping crew, and was walking around my property with her ever-present clipboard, snapping pictures of the newly installed plants. She paused at my front door, bent down to pick up the shredded remains of my irrigation system, and then, to my astonishment, pulled a small pair of pruning shears from her purse and snipped a few more branches from my hedges. I smiled. This was no longer just about HOA violations. This was harassment, plain and simple, and I had every second of it recorded. While I got home, I reviewed the footage, adding it to the growing file of evidence. I updated my security system, adding a few more cameras and reinforcing the cloud backup. I wasn't going to let her destroy a single leaf on my property without a full digital record of her every move. Kelsey had chosen the wrong homeowner to mess with. I was about to show her exactly what happens when you pick a fight with someone who understands the power of evidence. Ethan, our preliminary review confirms multiple violations of state water conservation laws, including unauthorized disconnection of water services and destruction of protected native plants. Expect a site inspection within the next 48 hours. Also, we've forwarded your video evidence to the environmental enforcement team. This could get interesting. Valerie. I couldn't help but chuckle. Kelsey had unwittingly escalated our neighborhood dispute into a full-blown regulatory investigation. I was already drafting a follow-up letter to the HOA board, formally requesting an emergency meeting to address Kelsey's actions, when my phone rang. It was Jackson Grant, the HOA treasurer, his voice strained and nervous. "Ethan, I've been thinking about our conversation. I'm willing to share what I know, but we can't talk over the phone. Meet me at Rocky Ridge Cafe around noon. I have some things you need to see." This was the break I had been waiting for. If Jackson was ready to talk, it meant the cracks in Kelsey's control over the HOA were finally starting to widen. At exactly 12 p.m., I arrived at the Rocky Ridge Cafe, a small, rustic coffee shop known for its mountain views and quiet corners. Jackson was already seated in a booth near the back, a stack of manila folders in front of him and a cup of black coffee shaking slightly in his hand. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "I'm taking a big risk by talking to you, but after what I saw at the emergency board meeting last night, I can't keep quiet anymore." He slid one of the folders across the table. "These are copies of financial statements and vendor contracts that Kelsey has been keeping off the official record. She claims they're for emergency maintenance, but the numbers don't add up. Every major landscaping project in the past 2 years has been run through her cousin's company, Bradford Landscaping, and they're charging nearly triple the market rate." I opened the folder and quickly scanned the documents. It was all there: inflated invoices, questionable payments, and even a few handwritten notes in Kelsey's loopy script, instructing the treasurer to adjust certain line items to avoid scrutiny from other board members. "Jackson, this is exactly what I needed," I said, my mind already racing through the implications. "Have you shown this to anyone else?" He shook his head quickly. "No, I don't plan to. Kelsey has a way of making life very difficult for anyone who crosses her. She's already threatened to revoke my parking privileges and block my wife's volunteer application at the community center. I just can't keep pretending everything is fine." I leaned in closer, lower my voice. "What about the other board members? Do any of them know about this?" Jackson hesitated. "A few might suspect something, but most of them either don't care or are too scared to speak up. Kelsey has a small circle of loyalists who back her every move, mostly because they get kickbacks like discounted landscaping or waived HOA fees." I leaned back, my mind piecing together the final elements of my plan. "Jackson, I appreciate you trusting me with this. I promise you, when this is over, Kelsey won't have the power to threaten anyone in this community again." He exhaled, visibly relieved. "Just be careful, Ethan. She plays dirty, and she has friends in the county offices. If she thinks you're coming for her, she won't go down without a fight." Armed with Jackson's documents and the upcoming inspection report from Valerie's department, I spent the rest of the day building a comprehensive case against Kelsey. I compiled the following key points. Financial misconduct. Over $80,000 in questionable landscaping charges funneled through her cousin's business, with payments disguised as routine maintenance. Property damage and vandalism. Clear video evidence of Kelsey directing the destruction of my landscaping without notice or consent. Water rights violations. The unauthorized disconnection of my water supply, a potential criminal offense under Colorado law. Invasion of privacy. Footage showing Kelsey trespassing on my property, peering through my windows, and snipping my hedges without permission. Conflict of interest. Direct financial benefits to her relatives through no-bid contracts and inflated invoices. I carefully organized everything into a digital folder, backed it up to multiple secure servers, and prepared a physical binder of evidence for the upcoming HOA meeting. I also reached out to a few of my colleagues who specialized in HOA litigation, asking for their input on potential legal strategies. The following morning, as I was reviewing my notes, I received a text from Martha Donovan. "Martha, Ethan, I just heard that Kelsey is calling an emergency HOA meeting for tonight. She's telling people you're a disruptive influence and planning to recommend fines and possibly even legal action. Be prepared." Perfect. Kelsey was about to walk into the biggest trap of her HOA career, and she had no idea the walls were already closing in around her. By the time the emergency HOA meeting rolled around that evening, I had meticulously prepared my case against Kelsey. I arrived at the Maple Ridge Estates Community Center 15 minutes early, binder in hand, and was met with the suspicious glances of a few board members huddled near the entrance. Clearly, Kelsey had already started her campaign to paint me as the neighborhood villain. As I walked into the meeting room, I noticed Kelsey at the front, animatedly discussing something with Patricia Jenkins, the HOA vice president. Patricia, a real estate agent known for her cutthroat negotiation tactics, nodded vigorously as Kelsey whispered something in her ear. They both shot me sharp, assessing looks as I took a seat near the back of the room. The meeting began with the usual formalities, the reading of the previous month's minutes, and a brief update on community finances. Then Kelsey took the floor, clearing her throat dramatically before launching into what I could only describe as a theatrical monologue. Before we get into the regular agenda, she began, her voice dripping with self-righteousness, I need to address a serious issue that threatens the harmony and safety of our beloved Maple Ridge Estates. We have a homeowner who has repeatedly violated community guidelines, ignored architectural standards, and installed dangerous, non-compliant landscaping that poses a significant hazard to the entire community. Several heads turned my way. I could feel the heat of dozens of eyes on me, but I kept my expression neutral, letting Kelsey dig her own grave. Mr. Ethan Caldwell, she continued, has not only ignored multiple compliance notices, but has also installed unauthorized surveillance devices around his property, potentially violating the privacy of his neighbors. I believe it is time for this board to take decisive action, including levying substantial fines and potentially moving toward a lien on his property if these violations are not immediately corrected. She paused, clearly expecting some sort of murmured agreement from the crowd. Instead, the room remained silent, the tension palpable. With that said, Kelsey added, adjusting her blazer with a self-satisfied smirk, I move that we impose a $10,000 fine on Mr. Caldwell, with an additional $500 per day for each day the violations remain uncorrected. Before anyone could second her motion, I stood, my binder in hand. I'd like to respond to these accusations, if I may, I said, keeping my tone calm and measured. Kelsey hesitated, her eyes narrowing. She clearly hadn't expected me to challenge her so directly. Fine, she snapped, folding her arms. You have 3 minutes. I approached the front of the room, placed my binder on the podium, and flipped it open to the first set of documents, the invoices Jackson had shared with me over coffee. I raised my voice slightly, making sure everyone in the room could hear. First, let's address these supposed community standards I've allegedly violated. I began, my eyes locking onto Kelsey's. According to the Maple Ridge Estates HOA bylaws, emergency landscaping actions like the one you ordered on my property require at least 7 days written notice to the homeowner, along with a documented safety hazard assessment. Neither of those things happened. I flipped to the next section, revealing the inflated invoices. Second, the company you hired for this emergency remediation, Bradford Landscaping, is owned by your cousin, Scott Bradford. These invoices, I said, holding up one of the sheets for emphasis, show that you authorized payments nearly 3 times the going market rate for services that were neither requested nor required. A few murmurs rippled through the audience. Kelsey's face flushed, her grip on her clipboard tightening visibly. But it gets better, I continued, flipping to the next tab. This unauthorized destruction of my property wasn't just a financial overreach. It also involved cutting off my water supply, without cause, a clear violation of Colorado state law, specifically Title 13, which governs water rights and utility service interruptions. That's a criminal act, punishable by substantial fines and potential jail time. I glanced around the room, noting the shocked expressions of several homeowners who clearly hadn't known the full extent of Kelsey's actions. And as for the claim that my security cameras violate privacy laws, I added, pulling a series of time-stamped photos from the binder. These are taken from my own property, documenting your repeated trespassing, vandalism, and harassment. You can see clearly here, I said, holding up one particularly damning image of Kelsey peering through my front window, that the only person violating privacy laws is you. The room fell into a stunned silence. Kelsey's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, her carefully crafted narrative crumbling before her eyes. I paused for effect, then dropped my final piece of evidence, a copy of the Colorado Department of Water Resources inspection notice I had received that morning, confirming multiple violations by the HOA's unauthorized landscaping changes. And just so we're clear, I concluded, turning to face the rest of the board, the state has already begun investigating these violations. I would strongly advise the rest of you to distance yourselves from this before the legal fallout lands directly on this board. A few of the board members exchanged nervous glances. Patricia Jenkins, who had been so confident earlier, now looked like she wanted to melt into her seat. Kelsey, her face a deep shade of red, opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, Jackson Grant stood up, holding a stack of papers of his own. I'd like to second Mr. Caldwell's motion to halt all pending fines and disciplinary actions against him, he said firmly. And I also move that we open an immediate investigation into the financial dealings of this board, including all contracts with Bradford Landscaping. A murmur of agreement swept through the room, several homeowners nodding vigorously. Kelsey looked around, realizing she had lost control of the narrative. As I returned to my seat, I caught her glaring at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of rage and desperation. The queen had been knocked off her throne, and the castle walls were starting to crumble. As I returned to my seat, the room buzzed with whispers. The veneer of Kelsey's control over Maple Ridge Estates had cracked wide open, and the homeowners were clearly shaken by what they had just heard. I watched as Kelsey frantically whispered to Patricia Jenkins, her loyal vice president, whose face had gone several shades paler. Before Kelsey could regain her composure, Valerie Matthews entered the community center, clipboard in hand, her official county badge clearly visible. A few heads turned, and the room fell into a tense silence as she made her way to the front of the room, directly addressing the board. "Good evening," Valerie said, her voice steady but firm. "I'm Valerie Matthews from the Colorado Department of Water Resources. We've been conducting a preliminary investigation into multiple complaints regarding illegal water disconnections and environmental violations within this community." Kelsey froze, her eyes wide, clearly not expecting this turn of events. Valerie continued, flipping open her clipboard. "After reviewing the evidence provided by Mr. Caldwell and conducting our own site inspections, we have identified significant violations of both state water management laws and local environmental protections. Specifically, the unauthorized disconnection of Mr. Caldwell's water service and the destruction of native landscaping without proper permits." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "These are serious offenses that carry substantial fines and potential criminal charges. I have already filed an official notice with the State Attorney General's office, and further action will be taken once our final report is completed." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Kelsey's face had turned an alarming shade of crimson, her hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles turned white. "But that's not all," Valerie added, her eyes locking onto Kelsey. "We have also discovered that the replacement landscaping you authorized through Bradford Landscaping violates multiple county water conservation ordinances. Not only were these plants non-native and water-intensive, but they were also installed without proper erosion control measures, potentially contaminating the nearby watershed." Several homeowners turned to whisper among themselves, clearly connecting the dots between their spiking water bills and the lush, water-hungry landscaping Kelsey had insisted upon. "Given the severity of these violations," Valerie concluded, "I recommend the immediate suspension of all landscaping activities and the removal of all unauthorized plantings at the HOA's expense. Failure to comply will result in daily fines and potential criminal charges against the responsible parties." With that, she stepped back, her presence an undeniable signal that the tide had turned against Kelsey. Before Kelsey could attempt any form of damage control, Jackson Grant stood again, this time with a confidence I hadn't seen before. "I move that we immediately suspend all board privileges for Kelsey Thompson pending a full financial audit and legal review," he said, his voice strong and clear. Several other board members, clearly rattled, quickly seconded the motion. The vote was unanimous, with even Patricia Jenkins hesitantly raising her hand, her loyalty to Kelsey apparently evaporating in the face of overwhelming evidence. Kelsey's mouth opened and closed in stunned silence, her carefully constructed world of power and control crumbling around her. And Jackson continued, seizing the moment, I also move that we hire an independent third-party firm to conduct a full audit of HOA funds and vendor contracts, including all payments to Bradford Landscaping and any other companies with potential conflicts of interest. The room erupted in murmured agreement. Homeowners who had previously stayed silent now leaned forward, nodding vigorously, clearly eager to distance themselves from Kelsey's reign. The vote passed quickly, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction as I watched Kelsey slump back in her chair, her once-iron grip on the community reduced to nothing more than a bitter scowl. After the meeting, several homeowners approached me, offering handshakes and words of support. Martha Donovan gave me a knowing smile as she passed, whispering, Nicely done, Ethan. You took down the queen. I nodded, a weight lifting from my shoulders as the realization hit me. The battle was over, and the community had finally woken up to the toxic leadership that had plagued it for years. 2 weeks later, the aftermath of the meeting spread through Maple Ridge Estates like wildfire. The audit revealed over $150,000 in questionable expenses, including inflated payments to Bradford Landscaping, unexplained cash withdrawals, and personal reimbursement for Kelsey's community improvement projects, including her notorious luxury patio set. Facing mounting pressure, Kelsey resigned from the board and quietly sold her home, moving out of the community she had once ruled with an iron fist. Her cousin's landscaping company, exposed as a central player in the financial scandal, quickly lost all its local contracts and folded within a month. Valerie's report to the state attorney general resulted in formal charges against Kelsey for unauthorized utility tampering and environmental violations, leading to a plea deal that included substantial fines and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in Colorado. As for me, I was approached by several of my neighbors to run for the now vacant board seat, but I politely declined. My goal had never been to join the HOA, but to restore a sense of fairness and accountability to the place I had chosen to call home. Instead, I helped form a new oversight committee to ensure transparency and prevent future abuses of power. We rewrote the community bylaws, adding clear checks and balances to prevent any one person from gaining too much control. On a sunny Saturday morning, I hosted a small gathering on my freshly restored lawn, surrounded by the native plants that had once been torn out in Kelsey's mad power grab. Martha, Jackson, and even Valerie stopped by, sharing stories and toasting to a fresh start from Maple Ridge Estates. As I watched my neighbors laughing and enjoying the view of the distant mountains, I realized that the real victory wasn't just in taking down a tyrant. It was in helping a fractured community rediscover its sense of trust and cooperation. Sometimes the biggest battles aren't won in courtrooms or board meetings, but in the quiet, determined actions of ordinary people standing up for what's right.